Okay, we're going to start with a really easy question. State your name, please.
Geraldine Carter.
Geraldine Carter. And Ms. Carter, you live in Titusville now, right?
Yes,
How long have you lived in Titusville?
I've been in Titusville ever since about 62. I think.
Okay. I think you lived in Smithfield for a while.
I was born and raised in Smithfield.
What do you remember about the Titusville of your youth? What do you remember about the Titusville of your youth?
I didn't know very much about it during my youth because we never did come to the south side of town. As a child, I was an adult, married, and had 4 kids by the time I got to Titusville.
As you said, you were an adult, you were married, you had children, and you were raising a family in Titusville.
Right.
Was Titusville a good place to raise a family?
It was at that time because I didn't know too much about it. I had to learn along with it, and the people that I met was real good people.
You said you had to learn about Titusville. What did you learn about Titusville?
Well, I hadn't heard too much. I learned the people, my neighbors, and most of them, when I moved to Titusville, were elderly people, and so I was about the youngest in the neighborhood at that time. And so I learned a lot from the elderly people.
What did you learn from them?
I learned that they were a close group of people, and they watch out after your children if they're outside playing. You didn't have to worry about them because someone was always watching. And I had girls, and they most was in the yard, but they would always have somebody that was looking after them.
I've talked to other people who've told me about Titusville back in the 60s, that it was a place where so many things were, stores and shops. Do you remember that?
Yes. After when I moved, moved to Titusville, I was in the Selma Village, Carver, and then I moved to 2nd Street, and that's when I learned about the different stores and things that was here. Before I moved down in this area, I worked all the time. I didn't know very much about it.
And you worked in what profession?
I was nursing.
You were a nurse, okay. What stores did you come to know in Titusville?
Well, when I moved to this area, it was the Greenfront store and Bowman store. And I think this was the only stores at that time.
I think there's someone said Neighbors.
Neighbors store. That was on First Street, across from the school.
And your children went to Washington School?
I had one that goes to Washington. I didn't have a one or mine, but that was my youngest one. She went to the Washington School.
I've talked to other people who have described Titusville as a place where you could find almost anything. Some people talked about, I think there were 2 bowling alleys in Titusville.
Yes, it was.
When you were raising your daughters in Titusville, did you talk to them about racism in Birmingham?
Well, no, because they never was bothered with that, and so I never did have to talk too much about it, no more when they went to school. I taught them how to be kind and not get angry with people saying ugly things, to just ignore it and just let it ride by.
You talked about telling your daughters to not respond to ugly things that people might say. Things like what?
Well, at the time, they were going to school with the other race, and I told them that there would be time that people would say things they might not like, but they didn't have to worry about it because as long as they didn't call their name, they could consider them not talking to them. That just let it go. And they did great. I didn't have no trouble at the schools. I didn't ever had to go to the school for any reason because they were good students, and the teachers said they were good children.
How nervous, worried were you about them going into an environment where they would be among Caucasians? And maybe, I'm guessing that this was a world where they had not experienced as many, say, hold on a second. How concerned were you with them going into an environment where they were clearly minority, where there were not as many of them as there were whites?
Well, I didn't worry too much about it because I just taught them to just be kind, speak, and go on. Anything negative, they didn't have to respond to it. Just let it pass. And I said, then you'll get along fine. But if you react to it, that's when bad things happen. So they got along fine. I didn't have no problem.
As your daughters went out to participate in these demonstrations, what did you think? What were you feeling when they did so?
Well, I was proud of them wanting to do it, but the person they were going with, I told them, I said, y'all better protect my girls and bring them back to me just like you took them away. I said, don't let anything happen to them, and they did. The only one time I think there was a problem, and they called me and said my girls was in jail. I said, jail? Yeah. But I found out that it was the young minister they had, but by him being in the car with him, they had them in the building, but they weren't necessarily in jail. But when they said jail, I was ready to walk. I think they was in tea time, wasn't it?
I don't know, but I think Gary did get arrested.
Yeah.
My older sister.
So they didn't arrest the kids. They just had them there because nowhere else to put them.
Like a holding
Yeah,
cell,
look,
yes.
and because they had to get the minister, they was holding him till his wife came, and he wasn't even married. They were just being cruel. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's because he was a white man with a group of black kids in the car with him, and that was why they stopped him and put him in jail. So when they called me and told me, well, they don't have to worry about it, we going after him. So they went and got him. Then they still wanted to hold him until his wife come, and he wasn't a married man. So I don't know how they were able to get him loose, but they did.
Sounds like they wanted to just hold him indefinitely.
Right. Mm-hmm. They did.
Do you believe in the principle of sticks and stones may break my bones, but words cannot hurt me?
Well, I didn't ever think about it too much. I just told them whatever they say to you, if they don't call your name, they're not speaking to you. So if you keep that in mind, then you know you're doing okay.
In Birmingham, across the board, not just at the school, that was Ramsey High School, right?
Right.
And obviously not just here in Titusville, because I think I'm correct. Titusville was a place where blacks could feel comfortable because you were among your own, right?
Well, it was when we moved here, because we was from the Smithfield area. And that's what I was born and raised in Smithfield, and so were my kids until I moved to the south side of town.
Birmingham in the 60s. Talk to me about it for blacks. Birmingham for blacks in the 60s.
Well, at the time there was a lot going on, but when I moved to Titusville, this church had men that was watching after the church, and so they watched the neighborhood. So I lived in the neighborhood, so I felt safe. It didn't bother me at all because there was always somebody watching the church and the block that I lived in. So it was very calm and quiet.
You were blessed to live across the street from the church?
Right.
Convenient, obviously, for going to church, I guess.
It was after I moved to Titusville, my kids was invited here to the church for Vacation Bible School. They loved it so much they wanted to stay here, so they was taking classes to learn this church method. So I came to learn what my kids was learning. And then when I found what they were learning, I was okay with them staying here, but I did not change my membership.
Your membership was where?
Baptist, and Lily Grove Baptist is on Druid Hill, and so I continued there, but my kids was here, but I knew what was going on, so I was all right with it.
As we said, the 1960s were a difficult time for blacks in Birmingham.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Do you remember maybe a first time that you experienced racism?
Yes. We lived in Smithfield on Graymont, and riding the bus, I worked at night, so I rode the bus at night. I wasn't able to stand on the bus line because the young people from the Elyton project would throw tomatoes at me. I was a nurse, I'm in white, throw tomatoes at me. So the driver was so kind. He knew I lived in the middle of the block, so he would stop and pick me up in front of my door. I didn't have to walk to the corner anymore to catch the bus.
Those people who threw tomatoes, they were white?
White kids.
And they threw tomatoes at you, why?
Standing on the bus line at night.
Why do you imagine they did that?
Well, at the time, what was going on everywhere else, I figured they was just call themselves having fun. They wanted to join in, so their way was to get the people that's standing on the bus stop.
When I say the name Bull Connor, what do you think?
Well, at the time, I just think of him as a person that just didn't like people. And I had a chance to meet him and take care of him. When he went into the nursing home, Hill Haven Nursing Home up by St. Vincent, I started working there, and he was a patient there.
Considering what he had meant to and what, frankly, he had done or ordered to people who look like you, did you have any reservation about working with him?
No, my thing was to win him over, and he wasn't the only one. That the governor was a patient there also, and I took care of him.
So, two of the more notorious racist segregationists in Birmingham history were under your care.
Right.
There would have been some among you who might have perhaps taken advantage of that opportunity to inflict ill will on either or both of them, but that never entered your mind?
No, because I moved in that section on the day shift to take care of those two, and they got to be one of my best friends. During that time, I did everything I could to make life easy for them, and they accepted, and they were real nice.
Another name from that time, Fred Shuttlesworth. What do you remember about him?
Well, I remember going to his church with my father when they had those meetings. And when my dad would go, I followed my dad everywhere he went. So I would go with him to those meetings. And so I enjoyed and listened to them talk about what we were going through and what we needed to do to make things better.
And what did we need to do?
We needed to, number one was pray, and then we teach our young people and things to not to react to the things that they were showing. That we do better, and that maybe that they will learn that we're not fighting back, and that we're not being mean. They would learn to at least expect to like, not really. We knew they didn't love us, but at least they know how to respect us.
I'll drop a name that with which I know you're familiar, Reverend Ellwanger. Talk to me about your experience with him.
Well, Pastor Ellwanger, when I moved to Titusville, he walked through the neighborhood, and he invited the kids to come to Vacation Bible School. And my kids were used to going to Bible school, but I didn't drive, and my church was on the other side of town. So they asked if they could go. I told them yes. And so they started the Vacation Bible School here. And then later they wanted to join the church, and they started having classes. So I came also to learn the rules and things of this church.
I know Reverend Ellwanger worked with Martin Luther King Jr.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
with the Civil Rights Movement.
Right.
He was unique in that, wasn't he?
Right. Yes, he was.
Did you wonder a little bit about, okay, he's white, and yet he is involved in this movement?
No, it didn't. It did not bother me because I had been to some of the meetings that they were having. Because like I said, I followed my dad everywhere he went, and I found out, that he was a genuine good follower. So I liked him a lot. So when we moved over here and he was asking the kids to come to Vacation Bible School here at the church, I felt okay with it. I felt free to let my girls, because I had all girls, and so I let the girls come.
Again, in the 60s, there were places that blacks, Negroes of that day, were not supposed to go.
Right.
There were white-only food counters, dining counters. There were white-only restrooms and water fountains. Conversely, there were water fountains that were designated for Negroes or the other N-word. You lived that.
Yes, I did.
Talk to me about that experience.
Well, the only places that I would go where that was happening was at downtown, and especially at the Five and Dime. You know, that was about the only stores I mostly would go to, and they had the black and white water, and I just never did. Well, I wasn't a good water drinker anyway, and just never did bother with it. I said, it looks the same to me, so I was wondering, did it taste different? But I never tried it to see.
I know during the Civil Rights Movement, a familiar song was "We Shall Overcome."
Mm-hmm.
Have we?
Not yet. We're much better than we used to be, but we haven't quite made it completely.
We think back on the overt racism of the 1960s. And then we fast forward to the events of January 6th, a couple of years ago. When you saw that or heard about that, were you at all concerned that history could be repeating itself?
I thought about it at that time, but I felt like the majority of us had gotten over that we were going to find a few that believed that's what they wanted. Well, we had, I believe that there was more people who did not like that and want that, and we wouldn't have to go through that again.
I'm bouncing around here a couple of things. When you were growing up, who were your role models?
Well, one was my parents. I had really good friends. My dad he was a deacon at the church, and he was one of the head deacon with number one that was always there to work with the pastor. And my mom, she was the one always in the kitchen cooking, feeding everybody when they had dinners and things. And so I just learned to follow after her. I wasn't a cook, but I was willing to help furnish the stuff, but I never did cook. Still don't cook.
Yeah, I was about to say, can I look for an invitation so I can taste some of your cooking?
And no, ex my daughter there, she'll tell you, Mama, don't cook. Never.
All right, we won't put you under that kind of test. Growing up, what did you want to be when you grew up?
A nurse. That's what I always wanted to be, a nurse.
Why?
I just like helping people. And my mom was kind of sickly when I was younger, and I just wanted to help. I just wanted to do something to help people. And so I didn't get to go to nursing school, but I always worked where I was looking after people. I worked in nursing homes and healthcare places, and I just loved it. But I never did go. I did the schooling, but I just never did go for take the test. That was my part. I never did do that. I should have.
Reverend Ellwanger and Pastor Noon, perhaps aside, what did you think about white people back in the 60s?
Well, I didn't really think no more than that. I knew we lived in the block below the Elyton project, and I knew the kids were the ones that was doing stuff. They would throw tomatoes at you, things, but I never did come in contact with the elderly people, so I didn't really think too much.
We're approaching the anniversary of the events of September 1963. Do you remember when the bomb went off at 16th Street?
I certainly do. I was on my way to Sunday school when we heard it, and we was up on the hill where the Shores lived. We were going by their house at the time that we heard that the church was being bombed. I was on my way to Sunday school.
Sunday school where?
At the little girl where I am now. Uh-huh.
When you found out the extent of the bombing and the casualties, the 4 girls who were killed, the 5th girl who was, of course, maimed, and others who were injured, what did you think?
I was just so hurt that someone would even do that to a church. I never thought of anybody being hurt at a church. I just always thought the church was one of the safe places.
Did that shake your resolve any, that the church was in your mind and should have been a safe place, and now even here evil has come and wreaked havoc?
Well, I learned that evil people is everywhere. They're in the church, in the homes, in the street, wherever you go, there's somebody that will do something that's not right.
When you were in school, yes, we're going back a ways.
Mm-hmm.
When you were in school, do you remember, or were you at all aware of the differences between, say, the equipment, the textbooks that you had, as opposed to what whites might have had?
No, I never thought of that, because I thought everybody was learning the same things in the schools, all the schools. Because I went to Tugger School over there on Inner Ridge and to Parker, so that was the only 2 schools I knew anything about.
Looking back as an adult to the education that you received, do you remember growing up blacks being included in the history lesson?
Yes, because we took Negro history.
We talked before about Titusville when you moved here and raised your family here. Compare the Titusville of today with the Titusville that you experienced back then.
Well, Titusville of the day is so much different because the people is different. It's changed a whole lot. A lot of the neighbors and things, there's none left. I think I'm about the only one that's left in the neighborhood that been here in a long time. And so the people that are here now, I don't even know who my neighbor is because I see nobody. Yeah. So no, all the ones that I knew, they've gone.
And of course, back then, you knew everybody.
Yes.
And everybody knew you.
Right.
I know from having been told that there were a number of stores, a number of businesses, doctor's offices, dentist offices, and the like that were in Titusville back then.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And they're not as prevalent now as they were. I suppose Titusville has declined. Can they come back?
But yes, there's a lot of things that we don't have that we had during that. There was no stores. There was no doctors close by. The only doctor still here is the dentist. The dentist is one of those I didn't like going to.
Should I ask why you did not like this particular dentist?
And not this particular, any of them. Because by the time I got to him, I had already disliked dentists.
So it's not just,
Just
this is not an indictment on
No,
that particular.
no, it's just a dentist period.
Okay, okay. So we don't have to edit that part out.
No.
Okay. Just making it clear.
Clear.
Just making it clear.
It's no one particular person, it's just that department.
What do you know or remember about freedom riders?
Well, I knew a few people that that did that, but I didn't know because I was still young, and my dad shunned me from a lot of that.
Why did he shun you from that?
I don't know. He just told me no, but I would go to meetings with him. If I couldn't be with him, he said no. So I didn't bother about it.
What did your dad do for a living?
My dad worked at the Tennessee plant, what we call TCNI, the Tennessee company. That's where he worked.
Dealing with iron, metal?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Do you remember the murder of Emmett Till?
Yes, I do.
Did you perhaps see the picture?
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
When you saw that picture in Jet magazine, I believe.
Yeah, it was. Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about the emotions that served.
Well, I cried because I had one brother, and I thought about what I would do if that would happen to him. And I had no sons of my own at the time, but I did raise some stepson later. It hurted very deeply to see that young man and the way what they did to him.
Talk about what I would have to describe as the courage of his mother to allow him to be seen like that.
I just admire her for being strong enough to do that. Let everybody see what they did to her child. That was a strong mother.
I'm asking you things if you remember, and I dare say there are probably things that you couldn't forget if you tried. When John Fitzgerald Kennedy was assassinated, do you remember that day?
Yes.
Talk to me about that day.
Well, I sit and watch TV the whole while to see how it was going to work out and how they were going to go about it. And I felt bad because I saw that he was trying to help us. And when he was assassinated, then I said, well, that's one might have been a good friend for us. That's gone. That was one who was going to follow, who would take his place.
Did you believe that maybe for the first time blacks had a president who actually represented you?
Well, I knew it was somebody that might, if they had a chance, it was there long enough, Mike would help us. They seemed to be sincere in wanting to help. And I was hoping that would happen. But after he was assassinated, then I didn't know in which direction we would go in.
Similar question, when years later, Martin Luther King Jr. was killed. He had, of course, said that he had a dream that the world would be different, that his children and other people of color would be judged by their character, not the color of their skin. Were you at all concerned that his dream would die with him?
Not necessarily. I feel like there was some people who believed in his dream that would try to work it out, and I was hoping that would happen. that we would come together and do something to help our people, to make his dreams come true.
Here's a name that you may remember, particularly living in Titusville. Does the name Bill Terry Jr. mean anything to you?
Yes.
What do you remember about Bill Terry Jr.?
I knew that his family was a member of this church. I didn't know too much about him because I think at the time he was in service, but I had heard his name. And what I had met him, but I didn't know too much about him. But I did know his mother and some other members of his family.
He, of course, was the black Birmingham serviceman who, before going to fight in Vietnam, told his family that if he were killed fighting for his country, he wanted to be buried in Elma Cemetery, which at that time was considered an impossibility.
Right.
Not to be morbid, but in the 60s, and of course you would have many decades beyond that you have lived and are still living, but in those days you could see Elmwood Cemetery.
Right.
Did you ever have any thought that anyone who looked like you might be buried in Elmwood Cemetery?
No, never.
Why?
Because the way things were at that time, we was so far separated, you know, the blacks and the whites, and I didn't think they would ever let us come into something where they liked better, you know, was running, and that we wouldn't happen. So when it did happen, then I knew then that there would be others to follow.
Amazing that, again, we knew about the color line when it came to lunch counters and restrooms and water fountains. But graves? Cemeteries? Amazing that the color line went that far, isn't it?
It is.
If your children had come to you, either of your children had come to you and said, I want to be President of the United States, how would you have responded?
At that time, I don't really know. I would have been afraid for them. And I might have said, is that really what you want to do? And to make sure they really wanted that.
When you say you were afraid for them, dumb question, why would you have been afraid for them?
Because the way things were at that time, there was nobody like us talking about being president. And I didn't want my kids hurt or even mistreated. So I would have said, is that really what you want? And, you know, make sure that they know what they wanted to do. Then I've been willing to help them.
And I guess you just answered my next question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. In your love for them, might you have looked to dissuade them from pursuing that?
I might have talked to them about it to make sure they knew that's what they wanted. But if they was adamant about it and said that was really what they wanted, I probably would have helped out.
Generations later, and you've lived through many of them, we now live in a world where the United States has had a black president. When that happened, can you describe your feelings that you felt?
I felt like maybe things were changing a little bit, that people were getting better, and that we really would begin to recognize that we all the same, we just different colors, but we're all human, and that we could make it. If we put our heads together, we could make a beautiful place.
I asked you before, referencing the song, "We Shall Overcome," and of course you said we have not yet overcome. What will it take for us to overcome?
Well, I would say prayer, more love, and understanding of each other. It would be some of the things that we need to do to change things.
Certain people that stand out in your mind when you brought the girls from Smithville to Titusville. So that was not too much before Pastor Ellwanger came, or was he here when you came to Titusville?
He was here when I.
He was already here. So
he
you
was
came
already
after
here.
57 when he was
Yeah.
here then. Okay. You came what, about 58, 9, 60 something?
Well, it was the 60s, so it was 63 when I moved over
You came in
across the
63,
street.
so you had the Scruggs on that
Right,
side of you over there. The Powells weren't over there too, were they? Do you remember?
Yeah, and it was the Henleys, the Whites,
Henley's, right.
and
And
there was that big
and the
two-story
mortuary-
house
Yeah,
that,
the mortuary people on that corner, right?
yeah, right across
Right,
there.
yeah,
What his
across
store
there.
is.
It's now,
Uh-huh.
It's now whatever it is over there now. So.
Yeah,
There was a mortuary. It was a lady. They owned. It was their house, but they owned.
she owned the funeral.
What were their names? Do you remember?
Me and Val just got to talking about it. Where is she?
Well, there you and me.
Val. And Miss Fannydale. But I'm trying to think of the funeral
What
home.
was the name of those people? The
What?
mortuary people that
Uh,
lived on the corner.
Okay, so
Miss Fannydale. But what was her? Do you remember the name of the funeral home?
I don't either.
What the owner?
give me some more of those names of those families, those households with which you were familiar back then.
Well, Miss Fannydale, the owner of the funeral home, lived where the Family Dollar is now. And across the street from me was the Henleys and the Whites. And then there was a two-story house on the corner from the school. And there were several families in there. And next door to me there was the lock.
I think that's
my neighbor, she's on the corner. They back facing the side of my house. They became my family when I moved there. She was my youngest child, godmother, and so we just was family right there. And on the other side of the what Dave them last name? The Hicks. And the youngest baby and my youngest were just like sisters. They grew up together. One would go nowhere without the other. So it was real good to me since I had come from the other side of town, moved to this side of town, and I had to learn people. But I found some good people, so yeah.
And apparently, as you said, you didn't just find people, you found family.
Right.
Were you surprised that Titusville was such a deeply woven family area?
Yes, I was, because things I had heard was about the other end of Titusville, but when I moved on this side, it was totally different. The people was much kinder, and they were most family oriented. So I felt good, and I was able to make a lot of friends. Most of them is past and gone now, and I'm about the only one left. I don't even remember if some of their family is still living around there, because the young people's around there, that we don't get to see each other that much.
You mentioned the, quote, other side of Titusville. Where are you speaking?
When I first moved to Smithfield, I was down by Elmwood Cemetery before I moved over here. But I had met people because the kids had got associated with this church. And then I came and went to class to learn what they were learning so I could feel okay with what they were learning. And I liked it, but I didn't change my membership. I just joined in. I used to tell my kids all the time I was a baptized Lutheran, a Baptist Lutheran. That's what I call myself.
So I should go across the street and you'll cook me up something?
No. I haven't cooked in a while. You don't think you would enjoy it?
All right.
I quit cooking.
Now, when you were here, what were some of the stores that you visited when you were in Titusville? Some of the mom and pop stores. Do you remember them at all?
The Bowman store. And yeah, I shouldn't forget the Walton because that was my maiden name. And I thought for a while I was related to them, but I wasn't. So I've enjoyed being over here because I was really scared to come to the South Side. I said, I got to move to the South Side. I don't know those people. But I got here and I learned people. And with Pastor Ellwanger coming down in the area where I was and saw the kids and invited them here. And they came and I came to see what it was all about. So I liked it, but not enough to change.
You liked them, but didn't like them that much.
I still love the people. When that one was brought to me, then he joined my family as my son.
And of course, you're referencing Pastor Noon, excuse me.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, he became a son. Because I met him, he was just a college student. He was just a little boy.
Yeah, just yesterday.
Yeah. So I just love him to pieces. When he left here and decided to be pastor somewhere else, can't have that.
Can't have it. What do you mean?
Ask him why he's here. I was writing every day.
To whom were you sending letters?
To him.
Tell him no.
Come home. No. He was in what, New Orleans?
Central Louisiana.
I told no, you belong here. So.
It was like Bear Bryant said, Mama called. Mama called.
I said, come on home now. I was looking at the letter he wrote me when we were there, and he sent me a picture. I got it in the Bible right now. Yeah, you're still handsome. Yeah, I was looking at it the other day. I said, oh, there it is.
Yeah, he's gotten a little pregnant.
I don't know. I'm going to go ahead and stop.